Hello, today we're going to recap what we did yesterday because we need that for today's work. So our starters are expanding brackets without showing any working. So you'll remember from yesterday that when you're multiplying out a squared bracket, what you end up with is the first term squared. You multiply the two terms together and double it, so that gives you minus 6x. And then you have the last one squared, and that's always plus, remember, always plus here. Okay, so the next one, again, same process. So you have the first thing squared, you multiply them together and double it, so that gives you plus 16x, and then you've got this one squared. And then the last one, this term squared to start with, multiply them together and double it, so minus 22t, and then this one squared, negative 11 times negative 11 is plus 121. Okay, so we need to have that fresh in our minds for our factorising by completing the square today. So this is, as you'll remember, the last bit of our factorising section. So we spent a few weeks on multiplying out brackets and factorising, and this is the end bit of it. Okay, so here we are. If we factorise by completing the square, your expression looks like these. Okay, these have all been factorised by completing the square. So let's have a look before we go on to factorising by completing the square. Let's just have a look at these and see what we can see similarity-wise, and then we'll get a much better idea of what we're going to be aiming for when we're completing the square. So if you have a look, in all these examples, they've all got a bracket with a letter and a number. Sometimes you've got a plus in the middle, sometimes you've got a minus. And the bracket is always squared. Okay, and then you've got a number on the end. So that's basically all this consists of, is a bracket squared with a number on the end. Okay, bracket squared with a number on the end. Okay, and let me just show you with the first one, if we multiplied it out, what we would get. So from the bracket squared, we would get the x squared, we'd get them multiplied together and doubled, so that'd be plus 6x. We'd also have this one squared, so that'd be plus 9. And on the end, we've got a plus 5. So altogether, that's x squared plus 6x plus 9 plus 5. Oops, I've just gone and said the same thing twice, haven't I? Plus 14, sorry. And we'll do one with some negatives in. Let's have a look at just the next one. So multiplying out a squared bracket, we get x squared. We multiply these two together and double it, so that gives us minus 4x. And then we've got plus 4 on the end of there. And don't forget, we've also got a plus 3. So that gives us x squared minus 4x. And then we've got plus 4 plus 3, so that's plus 7. Okay, so that's what we're aiming for when we're completing the square. We'll have a squared bracket and something on the end. Okay, so here we are. Here's our little set of instructions. So these are like our steps to success. So when we're completing the square, we need to create a squared bracket. So here's our first example that we're going to do. So we want to make a bracket that when we square it, we're going to get x squared and plus 6x. What we're going to do with this minus 3 is just put it on the end there and forget about it just now. Okay, so we need to think about, when we're multiplying out a squared bracket, what would we have to multiply out that our first two terms were x squared plus 6x. Okay, well remember, it would be x to give you the x squared, and then this term, remember, is that times that and doubled. Okay, so what we need to put in this space here is half of that. So that's going to be a 3. Okay. Then let's think about this bracket here, this x plus 3 squared. I'll just do it over here. When we multiply our x plus 3 squared, we'd get x squared and we'd get plus 6x and plus 9. Okay. Now, we want, if we look over here, we want the x squared, so that's fine. We want the plus 6x, so that's fine. But there's no mention of this plus 9. We don't need that. So what we have to do is take 9 off. Okay, and then we just simplify this a little bit. So we get x plus 3 squared minus 12. And that's it, done. Okay, so I'm going to show you that if we multiplied this out, that we would indeed get our x squared plus 6x minus 3. Okay, so multiplying out the squared bracket here, you get the first thing squared, times these together, that's 3x and double it, so plus 6x. You would get a plus 9, and then on the end here as well, you've got minus 12. So altogether, that would be x squared plus 6x minus 3. And that is what we were aiming at. Okay? So there's quite a lot of writing and a lot of scribbly bits that I've done there. And as we do a few examples, you'll get the hang of it, and you'll see how much you need to write down and how much is just me explaining. Okay, so we're going to start with another one just now. We're going to start with x squared plus 10x plus 8. Okay, so when you're completing the square, what that means is make a squared bracket. Okay, and when you're doing that, you forget about the term on the end because we'll deal with that later. All we're wanting to do is look at the x squared plus 10x, and then we can adjust what we've got in here. So our x squared has to come from an x in the front of the bracket. The plus 10x is double what you get when you do that times that. So that must mean that that's a 5 in here. And this is a positive, so that's got to be a plus here as well. Okay, now if we think about multiplying out x plus 5 squared, what we're going to get is x squared. We'll get that doubled, so that gives us plus 10x, and we'll get 25, because remember you always get that term squared as well. So we want the x squared, looking across here. We want the 10x, looking across. There's no mention of this plus 25, so we're going to have to take it off. Okay, and then when we just simplify, this minus 25 plus 8 is the same as minus 17. Okay, so that's us completed the square. So I'm going to do one more example just now, and then I'll point out something that means you don't have to do this bit every time. Okay, so we're gonna actually, I'll clear a bit of space so we can still see. I'll clear that space there, so that we can still see our steps. Okay, so we're going to start with x squared minus 8x plus 13. Okay, so what we do, let's look at our steps. Okay, so first thing, create your squared bracket. So let's do that. Okay, now in the squared bracket, remember what we need is the letter that we've got here, so that'll give us x, and we need half of this, so that would be minus 4. Okay, remember we've got a plus 13 on the end, and then here, if we think about x minus 4 squared, it's x squared minus 8x plus 16. And we don't want the 16, we only want the x squared minus 8x, so we have to take the 16 off. Okay, so that gives us x minus 4 squared, And then we've got minus 16 plus 13, so that's minus 3. And let's just have a look at this set of steps now. I only wrote very simple steps down for this. I don't think it's anywhere near as tricky or as complicated as factorising trinomials into 2 brackets. Right, so the first job is you create your squared bracket, and you do that, you make a squared bracket, you put whatever letter you've got there squared, you put that in the front, you look at how many x's you've got, and you put half of that in the bracket. And then let's have a look at the 3 examples we've done. So for the first one, when we had plus 3 there, we subtracted 9, because remember you get a 3 squared on the end that you don't want, so you have to take that off. When we had plus 5 here, we subtracted 25, because when you multiply out this squared bracket, you get 5 squared at the end that you don't want. And here, when we had minus 4, then when we multiplied that out, you get a plus 16 on the end that you don't want, so you have to take that off. So what we're doing is, here, if we look at our steps, create your squared bracket, like this, and then subtract the last term squared. So whatever you write down here in the bracket with the x, you square it and subtract it. Look here, square it and subtract it, square it and subtract it. So that's what you do, and then you just simplify your numbers. Okay, so let's do some where we're just practicing that, where we're not going to bother multiplying it out to check all the bits and pieces. Okay, so again, I'm just going to clear the space here. Let's get rid of all this. And then it'll look a bit neater and a bit more like we know what we're doing. Okay, there we go. Right, so let's just do a few examples. So we're going to start with x squared plus 16x minus 65. Sorry, plus 65. Okay, so we're going to follow the steps. First of all, create your squared bracket. So you write down a bracket squared, you put the letter at the beginning, and then you look at this and you put half of that in the bracket. Okay, then step 2, subtract the last term squared. So this is the last term in the bracket, and we're going to subtract that squared. So 8 times 8 is 64. Don't forget, we've still got plus 65 from here. Okay, so altogether, we've got x plus 8 squared, and then we've got minus 64 plus 65, so that's plus 1. So that's our answer, and that's all the working that we need to show. We don't need to do anything else. Okay, next one. X squared minus 2x plus 12. So let's follow the steps. So create a squared bracket. Remember, in the front of it, you put your letter. In the back of the squared bracket, you put half of that. So it'd be minus 1. Whatever you've just written down there, you square it and subtract it. So 1 squared is 1, so we're taking that off, and we've got our plus 12, so we just simplify the numbers on the end. So we've got x minus 1 squared, and then minus 1 plus 12 is plus 11. Okay, next one. Change the letter. Y squared plus 4y plus 15. Okay, so this time we make our squared bracket, we put the letter in the front, and we put half of that in the bracket. Then whatever number we've just written down, we take off that number squared, and then we've still got what we had in the beginning. Then we simplify. So y plus 2 squared, and then we've got minus 4 plus 15, so that's plus 11. Okay, 2 more examples so that we can get the hang of it. So the next one, we'll do t squared minus 8t minus 5. So create your squared bracket, put the letter at the beginning, put half of that in the bracket with it. Whatever number you just wrote down, so that's the 4, you take off that number squared, and then you've still got the number that you had on the end here. So altogether, we've got t minus 4 squared, and then minus 16 minus 5 gives you minus 21 altogether. Last example for completing the square, we'll use u this time. U squared minus 20u plus 50. So, create your squared bracket, put the letter at the beginning of it, put half of that in the bracket. Whatever number you just wrote down, you subtract that number squared, and then you've still got what you had on the end. So altogether, we've got u minus 10 squared, and minus 100 plus 50 is minus 50. Okay? So you should be able to practice those yourselves now. What I want you to do is make sure that when you create your squared bracket and you look at this number and you square it and put it there, this, have a look, is always minus. So it's minus, 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 minus. It doesn't matter whether this is a plus or a minus, okay? Regardless of what that sign is, this one here, where you subtract the squared term, you always subtract the squared term. You never ever add it. Okay? So, good luck with the questions on this, and I'll see you tomorrow.